Thank you for being here. We're going to go ahead and take our seats. I am Sherry Weiner. I am the presiding officer for the Metro Council, and I am also serving as acting vice mayor right now. And so I wanted to share, first of all, how sorry I am for everything that you've been through. I really haven't been able to get you off my mind. And on behalf of the Metro Council, we extend our heartfelt thoughts and prayers to everybody that's been affected. Can you hear me? So I wanted to quickly share that over the last, 49 days, your administrative and legislative branches have been working together seamlessly to continue the things that we do in Metro government to keep things running. And so my hat's off to our staff and to all the department heads, because things have been amazingly smooth. And you know, last year when we did the town hall out here, we found it to be immeasurably helpful. And we hope that it was helpful to everybody that came. And so if you were here last year, you know how much fun it was and how well attended it was. So thank you for being here again. Last year we were fortunate to be able to do 9 of these. And it was at the behest of then Vice Mayor Briley, and so we're grateful to him for putting these together. Just a couple of housekeeping things I want to share with you. If you would like to ask a question or just make a comment, please stand at the end of your row and someone will come to you so that we can all hear you. And then secondly, please share your name and your neighborhood. Don't give your address, but give us your neighborhood so that we know what part of the area you're from. Without any further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce and welcome the architect of the Nashville Town Hall, Mayor David Briley.
I'm far from an architect of anything. That is just completely and totally fabricated. You should be ashamed of yourself, Vice Mayor Weiner. We are also joined by Council Lady Lee here, and I saw Councilman Elrod, and I think that's all for council members right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have others join us as we come along. So let me start by saying good evening. It's been a tough couple of days in this part of our community and in the city overall. And last night at Mount Zion, we had the opportunity really to see the community come together and get close to each other and hold each other up. And it was both tragic and uplifting. Tragic because we were there because of the loss of life, and uplifting because it really was a moment where Nashville came together and showed how resilient it truly is. We're here in Antioch, and it's got a great group of council members: Councilman Fabian Bedney, Jacoby Adowell, Karen Johnson, Jason Potts, Taneka Vircher, and of course Council Lady Antoinette Lee, who is here with us tonight. This is my 49th day as mayor, and I will tell you that the last, I guess we're now 2.5 days into the worst days of being mayor. Yesterday morning I had the opportunity to go with our newest Nashville hero to Vanderbilt Hospital and meet with the 2 survivors of gunshot wounds. And just to be there with them and their families was heart-wrenching. Not only did they suffer these personal physical injuries, but each one of them was there at the restaurant with somebody very close to them, and they lost somebody close to them on top of being injured permanently. One of the things you learn when you're at the hospital with somebody who's been shot by an AR-15 is that the wound is horrific. This is not just getting shot with a 9mm, which sounds bad enough of its own, but It is a very destructive injury, and the wounds that this leaves in a person's body is not something that you quickly, if ever, really ever recover from. So sitting there or standing there with these two young women who had every opportunity in front of them to talk to the families of these four young people who had died, it's not something I would wish upon anybody. The only uplifting thing that has really happened in the last couple of days for me is that I did get to meet Mr. James Shaw Jr., who is everything you would want to see in a humble hero. I mean, initially he came out clearly and said that he was no hero in his mind, that he did everything he could just to save himself. But a person gets thrown into those circumstances every once in a while, and not every person would have made the choice he did, and we all are better off because of what he did. Now, Mr. Shaw is not here with us tonight, but I can tell you with certainty that he has been wound up tight with all of the exposure and all the stress, and on top of what he actually did in that room at that moment. And I'm sure that others of us in the room, myself included, have to varying degrees had the same thing happen to them. And so there are counselors here tonight with Metro Police Behavioral Health Division, and they're in the multi-purpose room tonight. Even if you're doing well, I hope everybody will take a moment in the coming days to check in with your family and friends and neighbors. And we have some condolence books over here for Tareen, the families of Tareen, Joe, D'Ebony, and Akila. And I hope everybody will take just a moment to sign in before you leave. And they'll be back in the mayor's lobby in the courthouse through next Tuesday. So before we go any further, I would like for us just to take a moment and be silent and in our own ways honor these victims, both the deceased and the wounded. Thank you. Over the last couple of days also, I had a chance to both stay in constant contact with the police department and to meet with the two detectives who actually apprehended the shooter. I met with them this morning, and I can say we all should be proud of Chief Anderson and his staff and everything they've done for the city over the last couple of days. The first 35 hours were rain-filled and cold, and they kept working hard along with their federal partners and our fire department that were the first responders on the scene. So let's give them a round of applause, and I'd like to ask Chief Anderson if he'd come give a few remarks.
Certainly, I took my moment of silence and to remember those four victims. Victims of homicide often get reduced to numbers, and I like to pause to reflect every now and then that these are real people that could have been sitting here with us tonight and have family still grieving. And certainly, those two persons critically injured that are in the hospital, those injuries will be with them for some time. And even the persons that were not injured, very traumatic experience just to be in those close quarters and subjected to that. There were 30 rounds fired inside and outside that building. And if it weren't for the actions of James Shaw Jr., certainly there would have been more deaths and more injuries. So we'll be eternally grateful to him. And questions that's come up, and this is your community, so I sort of wanted to brief you on the events that occurred, and just an overview, so that you know what we did and what you did. This happened in the early morning hours Sunday morning, and without warning. And but our witness's description, the gentleman pulled up in the truck, sat there for a few moments, and shot two people outside. We had two deceased persons outside the Waffle House, and then went inside shooting. James Shaw and the gentleman that he was there with took refuge in a back hallway in the restroom, but watched. And at the moment that the gunman was reloading, James Shaw charged him and was able to overpower him. He suffered some injuries himself. The barrel was hot from firing that many rounds that quickly, burned his hand pretty severely. But he was able to wrestle away the gun, tossed it behind the counter. The shooter then just walked away. He wrestled him outside, but once he got him outside, he just walked away. He was nude. We have no explanation for that. He was wearing a coat, jacket. He threw it off as soon as he crossed the street. We think maybe that the only reason he was wearing that jacket is he had extra ammunition in the jacket. He had two more 30-round magazines in the jacket. So our officers responded. His truck was left outside. As soon as we got the bomb squad to clear that, we have to be careful of secondary incidents. You know, we've had experience with that before. So once we got the bomb squad to clear that, started making a cursory search of that truck to try to find out information. Found some paychecks in there in Travis Ryan King, 29 years old. Found some paychecks in there. Found his address at some apartments. It's about a half a mile away. So we immediately go to those apartments. Find a witness that tells us that he had disappeared into the woods, but this time he was wearing pants, so he had gone in his apartment. Later, when his apartment was searched, found evidence of blood where he had been in there, where he'd injured himself. Several people were injured, flying glass and so forth, so it's very likely he injured himself on the glass. Immediately, a perimeter was set up, and a search started. We had about 200 officers involved. We pulled every car that we could. We had people that stayed after their shift. We brought in people early. I called Deputy Chief Todd Henry, and he's over all of our detectives, and had him just get everybody we can on a Sunday morning on the street. So we had detectives in unmarked cars. And then searching with dogs in the area, was able to track Ryan King for some distance, but then the rain had washed away the scent. And so this continued into the night. We became concerned about the neighborhood, and so we decided to do a door-to-door welfare check. And this is where the community comes in. His apprehension was teamwork on our part. Teamwork, working with the federal authorities, the FBI, Secret Service, ATF, spared nothing. I was called by the special agent in charge that morning, and he said, everybody from the deputy director on down will give you any resources that you need. But it was the community also, last and not least, the community. I became concerned that going door to door was going to, one, alarm people. I should go back and say, we try not to alarm the community unnecessarily, but we felt like that Sunday morning, we didn't know where he was, we didn't know what his intentions were, so we got out on the media as soon as we can, what had happened, so that everybody would know. We immediately went to all churches because we knew that churches would be, someone would be coming in 6, 7, 8 o'clock to open up the church for Sunday morning services, so we wanted to make sure that those were secure. And toward the evening hours, toward dark, we started door-to-door welfare checks just to make sure people were okay. And I became concerned, are we unnecessarily alarming people? Are people going to be upset that we're disturbing them? And so after about an hour, I checked in with 3 supervisors, and actually it was to the contrary. Officers were being invited in to eat a meal, to get dry, to get something to drink. So the support of the community was just overwhelming to us. And then ultimately, as we started again the next day, a door-to-door search, a grid search, to exhaust all the areas, it was again the community. We were very concerned. There was some thought that he could have gone out into these wooded areas. See, we're dealing with, as you know, your own neighborhood. It's a residential area, but it's also some commercial, schools, churches. But there's a large expanse, a wooded area. He could have gone off and killed himself. That happens in a good many cases across the country. We were concerned that he had gotten a ride, maybe gotten to the truck stop and was out of the area. But we were very concerned that he was in someone's residence. So we felt the need to do that grid search and going door to door again. But ultimately, it was the community that stepped forward, spotted him, and once he was spotted, then we had a team especially assigned. We had people on the grid search, but we had a team assigned just to answer these calls when someone was spotted. And so it was ultimately that team that followed him in the woods and took him into custody. He was taken into custody without incident. He had a backpack. To answer your questions about where he was and what he was doing, we don't know. We don't know. We can tell you his clothes were dry. As you know, it's rained heavily off and on all Sunday and Monday. The backpack was wet. So, given the circumstances, did he have that backpack stashed somewhere to go to it? We just don't know. We know a little bit about his background. He has obviously some mental problems. He has some issues. He was from a small town up in Illinois, Morton, Illinois. It's near Peoria. He has had some incidents there. He actually went to the White House once to meet with the president and insisted on meeting with the president, actually crossed a barrier there. He was arrested by the Secret Service. Following that, the county sheriff, where he lives, and the FBI paid him a visit. In Illinois, these have been some questions about the weapons. In Illinois, you have to have a license, so to speak, to possess a weapon. It's called a firearms owner's identification card. And to actually possess a weapon, not carry it, but just possess it, you have to have that license. So that license was revoked and his guns were taken. However, at some point, the guns were given back to his father. And then at some point, his father gave the guns back to him. We know he traveled to Colorado. I think he worked there briefly. He traveled here to Nashville, and he worked briefly at a couple of different construction concerns. The weapon in question, this AR-15, which, by the way, as the mayor has described, it's a weapon made for warfare. It's not a weapon made for peace purposes. It's not a hunting weapon. So that weapon was the weapon that caused all the deaths at the Waffle House. There were 3 other weapons. We located 2 of those weapons, long guns, rifles, in his apartment, but the one handgun, 45 semi-automatic pistol, was unaccounted for. That was in his backpack along with extra .45 caliber ammunition. He's been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Today, that was done initially, and then today 5 more warrants for attempted murder were taken out. His bond was initially set at $2 million, and I think that the public expressed some dissatisfaction with that. And so today, Judge Mondelli stepped in and revoked that bond. So he will not be able to make bond. That would not even be considered until March the 7th, I think, is his first court date. So that's some of the questions that I've been getting and that I felt like you might want to know the answer to. I can't stand before a crowd without talking about what I call our current epidemic, juvenile violence. And over the years, I've watched the violent crimes committed age-wise go down, down, down. We're down to 11-year-olds. So about 2 months ago, we felt the need to put a task force together just to address juvenile crime. So the commanders of each of the 8 precincts got together and discussed the best way to accomplish this. And so each of the commanders gave up 2 officers on each of their shifts and a supervisor out of Midtown just to address juvenile violent crime issues. And they have been very successful in taking people off the street, but we as a society are not being as successful as we can be in keeping them off the street and keeping them, bringing them back to where they need to be so they can be sitting in chairs beside you and I at some time. But just today, there was a carjacking out here at the mall, a 15-year-old. And so over the past few months, 44 firearms have been confiscated from juveniles by the Juvenile Crime Task Force. So I say all that to say that's a problem for you and I. Our police officers are bringing them in. We've got a court system, but somewhere as a society, we've got to figure out how to be the parents and guardians to the kids that aren't receiving that at this point. So I can tell you the police department is working hard. I know the court system is working hard, but some way or another, we've got to figure out how to get these kids back onto the right path. So thank you for hearing me, and I'm always around. Commander Trickey is back here, and Commander of the South Precinct. So we're always available for anything you'd like.
So just just a couple of comments before we open it up to questions. We decided to do the town halls immediately after I was sworn in 49 days ago. The reason being that we felt it was important to be present in the community, answer questions face to face, and just make sure everybody understood that government is continuing along the same lines that it has for so long in Nashville. It's also part of an overall attempt by the city to make sure that we're looking for community input as we make decisions. So recently we finished the first community-wide resident survey, which showed we are doing an excellent job in a whole list of areas, but there are some areas where we could do a better job. And part of that is making sure that we engage with people in the community to hear what their concerns and requests are. So I'm going to sit down here because I stand up all the time, and say I'm ready. Oh, before I open it up to questions, I do want to thank all the Metro employees from virtually every department who are here tonight. It's extra work for them to come. I want to thank the mayor's office staff for doing everything to set this up, because it's extra work for them. And I hope everybody here knows how hard Metro employees do work to make sure that government is provides services at a very high level. And I certainly appreciate everything they've done for me over the last 49 days just to keep the city going in a positive direction. So, with that, if there are any questions, my usual joke is to say, okay, no questions, everybody can go home. So, and I will say that we've been joined by, I know, Council Lady Tanika Vercher, and Council who's back here with the chief, and Council Lady Jacobia Dowell. This is her district right here that we're in right now. So. Everybody relax. You can ask a question.
All right, David, we'll start you off. Good evening. My name is Cheryl Mays. I live right up the street in Cambridge Forest, and that's my awesome council lady right there. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you. When all of this craziness happened out here, I remember getting up and hearing about these young people. I'll say this, as a former school board member, the first thought I had was, those are my babies. Every single one of those are my babies. And I started thinking about the families, and I started thinking about this community. And I thought about how one individual, clearly with some sort of mental incapacity, had held my community hostage for 36 hours. And I was very, very angry. But what eased that anger was the hard work of every single one of the Metro Police Department members, every single one of those ATF, FBI, security agents, everybody who took this community under their wings and said, we're not going to stop until we find this guy. And so on behalf of my family, who lives half a mile from that restaurant, a mile from that restaurant, and I live, as I said, up the street, I thank you, and I thank every single one of these officers who did their job to protect us.
No, it's yours.
John, he's supposed to hold on to it. That way you don't get to talk for too long.
You did that just for me, didn't you?
But it's too late now.
Mayor Briley, we've been together for a number of years, doing many things for metropolitan government, increasing the ability of neighborhoods to define and defend their homes and community. So I appreciate you being out here in the Southeast Neighbors community, and appreciate all you've done over these last couple of days, which have been pretty horrific for everybody. When you were vice mayor, you did start the transparency task force, I think is what you called it, and I was just wondering how we're doing on creating a more transparent and communicative government according to the items that you outlined and the things we've talked about last year and years past.
Well, I'm going to leave it up to the council to make more progress after I left there, but I think there's been progress made there. I'm trying to focus more on the executive side at this point, and so what we're doing here right now, and there are 4 more already scheduled in the coming weeks. We're going to do one in each each school board district to start with, so there'll be 9 overall. And I'm still thinking about what else to do, and I'll give you a brief story. I guess last week I had a visit from a lady in town, and she had moved to Nashville in, I think she said 1975. And before she knew anybody, and she had no fear of failure, then Mayor Richard Fulton, when he got elected, in his first 21 days, he essentially had office hours where people could just come in and talk. And she showed up, and she was a registered nurse, and she had been to the jail. And in the 1970s, the jail was not a great place. I mean, nobody wants to go to jail, but in the 70s, it was pretty harsh in many respects. And so she laid that out to then Mayor Fulton and said, I really think we ought to do A, B, C, and D. And he said, okay, you're hired. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, this is the story she tells, at least. Immediately, she was brought on into the government. Back in those days, there were lots of federal grants that had a fair amount of leeway in terms of what you could do. And so she got to spend some time as a young professional making a difference in the jails, trying to improve the health care and the mental health facilities there. So that's the kind of idea I'm thinking about, just in terms of I'm not sure we'll have office hours exactly, but I know lots of council members do it, and I think it's a relatively meaningful way to interact with people one-on-one. So the first one of these events that we did, I was up on a stage behind a podium, and I think everybody saw that we could do it a little bit better, a little bit more informally, and so today I'm here like this, and I think this is more likely the way we're going to do it. I don't promise to have every answer, but I promise to listen to every question. So that's my sense of it.
Oh, okay. Mr. Mayor, thanks again for being here tonight. I wrote this down so I get it right.
I wrote down my answer too. So
you might have been asked this already in other town halls because I know it's a concern, but in the last 18 months, the Republicans in the state legislature have seemed to adopt a sort of antagonistic attitude toward Nashville and I think the other metropolitan areas of our state, and they've overridden the democratic will of our citizens and our officials on such issues as gun control, low and moderate income housing set-asides, short-term residential rental regulations, even what historical monuments we choose to display, and how our city welcomes immigrants and refugees. If you're elected next month, and I certainly hope that you are, will you stand up to this meddling, and will you fight for our citizens' rights for what we consider to be self-determination?
yes, I will. Yes, I will. So just I'm probably not supposed to do this, but I'm gonna be a lawyer for about 30 seconds and say that every city and county is a creation of state law, and that's why they can preempt us. That's why they can do it, and there's nothing to prevent them from. Well, there's some novel theories out there, but very little that can be done to prevent them from doing it. So that's the lay of the land. My first approach to all this is to try and build better personal relationships with the 130-something people that are up there. So within the first week of getting elected, I went and spent some time face-to-face and talked to people in the legislature, including the ones who are the most antagonistic to Nashville, just to try and build a little bit more of a personal relationship, even if with people with whom I don't agree. One of the things yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and adopt a tactic that is least likely to cause more turmoil, because I don't think any more turmoil is helpful to us in terms of the relationship between the city and the state. Compromise has become sort of a dirty word in our country right now. And so I don't think that's what we ought to talk about. I think what we need to talk about is building out the common ground. We need to spend more time talking to each other, including people with whom we don't agree, to hash out the fact that we actually agree on a whole lot. And once we sort of spend time in that conversation and build more common ground, I think it'll be easier for us to expand it into areas. So half an hour ago, I learned about red flag laws, which are laws that allow family members to who have a family member who has perhaps a mental illness that's flaring up or significant. The family member knows they have a gun, and you can work with the police to get that gun taken away from the person with a mental illness. Moms Demand Action, I think they think that might be an area where we can expand that common ground, where we can do more, where people might all sort of get on board with that. So I think we gotta find those places where we can expand the common ground, and try and work with the state legislature as much as we possibly can, and then stand up and say no where we absolutely can't.
Aside from the obvious solution of electing a former Nashville mayor to be our next governor. Is there any other thing that you think citizens can do to sort of help toward that goal?
Well, the state legislature has become a place where Nashville's local zoning laws are regularly tinkered with, and that is a completely and totally nonpartisan issue. So that is not an issue where Republicans and Democrats line up neatly on one side or another of an issue. I think everybody living in every neighborhood, every community in this town would prefer for those issues to be decided locally as opposed to at the state. So I think that is fertile ground for Nashvillians and people across the state to go up and try and make some headway with state legislators to keep them for them to learn the importance of not preempting us by going up there where everybody does agree that we should be handling that locally. So I would the legislature leaves town, I think, tomorrow, the next day. They're almost done. So next year, that will be an important thing to go up there and work on, I think.
Thank you. I'm Linda McFadgen Ketchum. I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We are a nonpartisan gun violence prevention and gun safety group, and I was very happy to hear you mentioning the red flag laws, which really could happen in our state legislature. You were very right when you said that the effects of these kinds of injuries and the trauma that has been experienced is very long lasting. I don't know that anyone ever recovers from it, but I bring greetings from our large organization in this county to this community to say that we stand with you. We are very sorry for what you have suffered, and we are here to help in any way that we can. The red flag laws would allow family members to work with judges and the police to temporarily remove guns. It's not a confiscation. It's a temporary removal when a person is behaving in a way that frightens the family and they have fears that they're going to hurt someone or themselves, because we know that about 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. And if people don't have easy access to the guns in the homes, they will be less likely to take their lives. So thank you for everything you have done and will do to help us save lives.
Ditto.
Okay. My name is, oh, that's weird. Let me stand over here. My name is Jennifer Samardak. I live up off of Hamilton Church, and I've never been to one of these before, but I wanted to be with my community because this weekend's just been atrocious, and I don't really remember Sunday at all. So thanks for having this and having counselors available, because I'm going to use one. So I don't know what you're supposed to ask, but I would love to have brush pickup more often. So that would be fabulous.
Public Works, note taken.
And then I also, and I don't know where I would even find this, but when victims, families have tragedies like this, there's lots of unexpected expenses, plane tickets, funerals, hospital bills, groceries. Someone needs to go walk the dog while you're making arrangements. And I don't know if there's a point person who is coordinating some of those things, but I have resources and I would like to, I don't know, like adopt a family or like how that works, but some of those little things that fall through the cracks. So I don't know if there's someone here who's a point person for that, but please find me.
I do know we're going to circle back, and hopefully before I'm done, we'll have somebody to direct you to. But I do know there are two GoFundMe pages. One that is for the families of the victims, and one that has been created for Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw created the one for the families and those injured. And so I think if you not to advertise for Google, but if you Google Waffle House shooting GoFundMe, I think both of those pages there are 4 pages now. So if you pop, there's an opportunity to do it through there. I think we'll be hearing more from Mr. Shaw. I mean, I think he was transformed by this moment, and I think we're likely to see him pop up again. There's been very little humorous that has arisen out of this, but I will tell you, because we do need to keep laughing a little bit, 2 funny things that did happen. First is when Mr. Shaw was speaking at the very first event, he said something about how somebody asked him why he'd gone to church, and he stood up and said, well, I'm not really religious. I believe in God, but I don't know if it's Buddha or whatever. And his pastor, who I had been to church with that morning, was standing in the back of the room, and he was just shaking his head, just like, what have I done? What have I done? And then the second one was when I went to the hospital, I walked into the second young woman's room and I said, is there anything I can do for you? And before the words even really got out of my mouth, her dad said, well, she just asked me if there was anything you could do about the potholes on 440. And so, I mean, we got to find something to laugh about in what is otherwise a completely and horrible set of circumstances. So, well, it looks like I'm going to get home early tonight unless there are any other questions.
Can you hold it? Yeah, I can hold it. My name is Sharon Barker. Okay. Thank you. My name is Sharon Barker, and I've lived in Antioch for 23 years in Kensal Green subdivision. My question is regarding sanctuary cities. So there was a Naturalize Now campaign in 2015, and 21 cities joined the campaign. I noticed that Nashville didn't join the campaign. It's my understanding that sanctuary cities are prohibited under Tennessee law. And at one point, there might have been an effort to turn Nashville into a sanctuary-like city jurisdiction, but political opposition and legal opinion forced a withdrawal from consideration. So my question is, what is your opinion on working with federal agents working for the Department of Homeland Security, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Division, because we have a lot of immigrants in Antioch, and I kind of want to know what your position is on that.
Well, there is a state law that prohibits us from, quote unquote, becoming a sanctuary city. There is legislation that I believe actually is still pending in the legislature this year at one point it said it was going to require local officials to cooperate with federal authorities. There was also, I think at some point I think it may have made it a felony to adopt. I'm not sure about this, but at one point they were talking about making it a felony for local officials to vote in favor of sanctuary city legislation. So our state is very much on one end of the spectrum when it comes to this. Councilman Fabian Bedney, I think, put it pretty clearly today. This shooter would not have been apprehended but for a tip that came from somebody in the community. And that's how we live here. We work together. All of this, all of the rhetoric from Washington, anti-immigrant rhetoric, all of the hostility, the ICE raids that are taking place in our state right now are dividing us, and they are forcing immigrants into the shadows so that they cannot help us do things like this. I don't know if the witness this week was an immigrant or not, but everything I've heard from our Metro Police Department is that we need the cooperation of everybody in town, regardless of their immigration status, in order to protect the people who live in this community. So that's the lead that I will follow from our police department, that will be more safe. I think it's more consistent with the values of this community, frankly, for us to be more open and more accepting. And so I hope that the trend in Washington, the anti-immigrant trend, will dissipate and we'll start to see some better movement here in this community. Nashville has a strong immigrant population, both Kurdish and Somali and Latin American and Asian, African, from all around the world right now. And the real seed of that, in my opinion, the real seed of that in our community is Catholic charities. If you go back and look at for one particular thing that changed this community, so it's deeply embedded in the Christian faith in our community to have open arms for the immigrant. It goes back to the story of the birth of Christ, and so I don't see this place changing. I just hope the rest of the country becomes more accepting and more open-minded and more thoughtful about where we're headed on immigration.
Good afternoon. My name is Doris Palomino. I am one of the immigrants that live in Antioch. Thank you so much, Sharon, for making that question. I live off Bell Road, and I want to share my concern, as you have mentioned, Mayor Briley here, about how we can work locally in order to make this possible, that we immigrants, non-immigrants, we can get together, can meet, because I think that makes the whole difference. If we don't, can we hear? Can you hear? Oh. Happen. And I'm shy, okay. So I was trying to ask you, if you have any ideas how locally we can create a sense of community, because the fact is that we, I think, see like different groups. We the Latinos, we the Kurdish, we the African Americans, we the, U.S. citizens that support immigrants, we the ones, but it's not that we really meld. It's like, yeah, I appreciate you, yeah, you're my neighbor, but we really don't really interact. And honestly, as living in Antioch, one of the things that I really enjoy living here 5 years is how diverse is this community. Sorry, my boss, I'm just shy. But it breaks my heart that sometimes diversity is just used as a title. And I feel sometimes like a token. And I have worked in some places where basically it was used as a token. And that does not make sense. I don't want that people tell me, oh, it's great, I'm your friend, great, we love diversity. If you really don't care, if you really don't stand with me when we need you, when there's racial profiling, and I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to tell you, Chief Anderson, I appreciate all the work that you do, but there's a lot of racial profiling from the police. And I have been victim of that situation. So how are we really going to get to know each other? What kind of actions we can specifically do in order to bring together this community? Because I think that's what really can build a relationship. The same thing that you were saying about how you're creating personal relations with legislators in Tennessee, that's what we need to do locally. And I just want some ideas. More than, we have a beautiful community center, but it doesn't mean that we mingle. We have some eventual community activities, but that doesn't mean that we mingle. So what can we specifically do to really make sure that diversity is truly embraced and it's not just using like, yeah, we welcome in, when this is not really happening. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, I can honestly say I don't have all the answers. I think that's totally, that's just apparent, right? None of us really have all the answers to that. So let me say that this what we're doing right now is meant to be that sort of opportunity where we can everybody from different perspectives and backgrounds can be in the same room and talk to each other. And so I am committed to being out in the public like this. I don't know, I don't want to say every week, because then I can't do it every week probably, but regularly. We're going to be out regularly talking to people. One of the things that gives me great hope about the issue you bring up is going to a Metro public school, right? You go to a Metro public school and every classroom is just completely full with people from every different background. And so we know that in a generation, all our kids are going to have friends from different races, from different backgrounds, and some of this is going to sort of fade a little bit. That doesn't mean we should not worry about it now. There's stuff to do now. The mayor's office has a Spanish speaker already, and so we're working to try and do more just in terms of having people in the office that are from a particular background. In the coming weeks, assuming I'm elected May 24th, early voting starts May 4th, we'll be adding, my goal is to add someone from the Muslim community to the mayor's office, because that's not happened before. We need to have somebody representing that community. Notably, last Friday, Ashford Hughes, who is here somewhere, there, looking right at you, was named the city's chief diversity, inclusion, and equity officer. So Ashford is going to be leading our efforts to make sure that we're focused on these issues, to make sure that we're doing the kind of outreach that you asked for. Y también, ¿cómo se llama otra vez? No oí. Okay. Lourdes.
Doris Palomino.
Señora Palomino, también trataré de hablar en español cuando puedo, porque yo sé que es muy importante que la gente aquí en Nashville entienden que el alcalde quiere y que habla un poco de español, y por eso me da mucha alegría que está aquí esta noche. Ok, de nada. So, my Spanish is really weak because I don't speak it as much as I once did, and I totally humiliate myself every time I say it. I'm like, oh my God, why did I just say that? But I do it because we have people who come from all kinds of different places, and they need to know that, hey, number one, the mayor knows it is hard to speak another language because he totally brutalizes it every time he does it. And two, that we're trying to do something here. So I know that was hard for her to ask that question, and I appreciate the fact that she did.
Mayor Briley. Oh. You can go ahead, Brian. I'll go first? Yeah, go ahead. You go first.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Briley, for your time, for this opportunity. We can able come to here to meet these nice people to discuss about how you hear from us about the city, that Nashville is our city. I'm Nozal Haurami. I'm from Kurdish community. I have been moved here about 20 years. And Nashville is our city. It's all we sitting in one boat. All our responsibility to maintain Nashville. But regarding the immigrant community, I think the mayor office did a great job. They created the New American apartment, and I have been a member of them. They opened their doors for us. And also the community, they are pro-Nashvilleian, proactive, and they have been cooperating with the police department, law enforcement, metro schools, mayor office, State Department, all these. We have been proactive, we have been cooperative with, in order that we have this our city. We come to stay. We don't go back to anywhere else. This is our city. I have 4 children, they're born here. Where they have go to back. And those who they are talking about the immigrant, they are business maker. They want to raise this voice and to hiring some people to collect some money from somewhere. They are against the religion, they are against the Islam, they are against the immigrant, and every time they bring one issue. Instead of that, if they spend all these efforts on their energy to fix the problem, now we will be in the better situation. And thank you for all of you, and thank you for the police department. In the past 2 days, past 3 days, they're passing through the hardship. Even we have a property in Old Franklin Road. Yesterday, on Sunday, one of the teachers, we have Sunday school there, they saw one person, a tall guy, skinny, white, and he came to there and he escaped, he running away at the property. And we called the police, I called 911, I called the special investigators, and thanks for them, they sent SWAT team. They went everywhere. Even I give them the key of the building. If you want to stay here, this is the key of the building. Stay here using the restroom, anything you want, you can have our property. Thanks for coming to protect our community, to protect the safety and security. Just one thing that my request is, to open more doors for the immigrant, to open more doors for the neighborhoods, especially for the councilmen in here. Need to have more communication with the peoples. I know Fabian, every time he announcement, he has a meeting that day, and we go to the meetings. But I need other councilmen, they're having such kind of activities. People, they go in there, hearing for them. And in the other ways, in the police department, before they have a neighborhood watch group, need to reactivate this neighborhood watch group. It need to be expanded to everywhere in the communities. Everyone, we need to be the eyes of the police until to prevent the crimes. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Sure. So one thing that you said, a couple of things I want to follow up on. First is, I consider it one of my primary jobs is to make sure that young people from whatever background have as many avenues towards success as possible. And you have to be especially focused on the immigrant community in that respect, just because they're newer to our city. So we've got to work on that, and I'm focused on that every day. The second thing is it's easy to see how much the Kurdish community in Nashville has already integrated here. So I went, not this Saturday, but last Saturday, to a young professionals group, Kurdish young professionals group. And I got there a little bit early, and it was a panel discussion of, I think, 3 or 4 young Kurdish professionals. And it didn't matter that they were Kurdish. I mean, it was completely and totally irrelevant. I mean, they were young professionals, and they were talking just about what every other young professional in town would talk about. How do you move up in your career? How do you satisfy your parents? They want me to do something. I don't want to do that. How do you feel good about yourself? How does your religion fit into your day-to-day life? It was not relevant, really, that they were Kurdish in descent. And I think that is true. That's what we got to make sure is possible for every immigrant who comes to our town is that they can live what is best about America, and that what is best, in my opinion, about America is making sure that each and every person has the opportunity to work as hard as they want to, excel as far as they can, have a happy life, raise a family. And there are clear impediments to a lot of people in our town right now in that regard. That's true for everybody young right now. It's not. It's more true for some groups than others, but they're all struggling, I think, right now to find a pathway to reaching their maximum potential. So that's what government is all about, in my mind, is finding ways for people to maximize their own potential. So with the Kurdish community, I've got some ideas. I'm working with some people, and we're going to make progress.
Mr. Mayor, over here.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome, Mayor Briley. I have a couple of points. My name is Joelle Bowers. I am from Nashville. I'm a graduate of Antioch High School. I live here. I'm also an educator. I taught at Antioch and at Cane Ridge, also Fish University. I live here. We're one of the most diverse community there is, and we love it. You know, we all welcome each other. I think the proper laws and the boundaries for everyone and the protection and guidance will be the pathway for us all. We all want justice. I think that the reason I came here tonight, I wanted to personally thank you. And not just you, but also thank Chief Anderson, the police, and everyone else. I live a couple of houses up that hill from the Waffle House in the Summerfield subdivision. Also within that didn't happen near my home. That was actually within my home. Those are my family members and friends that were hurt in there. Where he was captured, my cousin lives right behind that building where he was captured. What you guys need to understand is we're coming back and we're getting together because I feel the worst part is over, but the fight is yet to begin. This morning when I woke up and found out that he had a bond, and then the bond had been revoked, it was almost like a slap in the community because we had went through not only the shooting, but the stakeout, the manhunt, to be literally in the middle of something like that with helicopters flying 24 hours and the officers and stuff who risked their lives as well. We're praying for not only us, but for you guys. And you guys were brave enough to get out there and check the bushes, the trash cans behind the cars and the backyards and all of that, and we really appreciate that. And you knocked door to door because that gave us safety. We couldn't go out there and check on our own family members and see what's happening. Mayor Briley, you had the conviction to stand up and call it what it was. That was a terrorist act against innocent individuals. I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart because we must deal with truth. We must deal with truth. Evil is evil and good is good. It's not about one race. It's not about how much anybody costs. And I want to say this, the goodness, it's always something good. God will turn it around. There were hundreds to thousands of people. If you count the hundreds of police officers and every agency that was out there, the news that was there, letting us know in our homes minute by minute what was going on so we could know, to allow us to be out and go to church on Sunday and come back. And the things like that, we really appreciated all of that. But the goodness in every single person, in the neighbors with the porch lights on, the Facebook, those who cared, those who came out and watched, those who are support. We cannot stop now. People are hurting over there. People are scared. They still don't know if to let their kids go to school, and that incident could have happened anywhere. We saw on the news today something right now that's happening at a Home Depot in Texas. I mean, it can happen anywhere. Nashville, we have experienced we've been through floods, tornadoes, the theater right over there, the shooting, Burnett Chapel Church of Christ just down the street where we voted at when I lived over there. This stuff, everything that happens in every part of the neighborhood, it's not just Mayor Briley's responsibility, it's not Chief Anderson's, it's all of our responsibilities. It's time to recognize you see someone in trouble, someone hurting, to say something. It's obvious this individual, this man they dropped the ball. We keep hearing it, But it's time for us to stand up and hold people accountable. To my elected officials, my hats are off to you guys who are true to the cause. I know what it takes to get out there, to give your time, your energy to the cause, to deal with people who, when they disagree with you, they call you names, they put you down. It's hard for them out here, you guys, and I understand that. I am with our elected officials. I'm not with some of these politicians who would say or do whatever at the cost of us, at the expense of us. My last point, and I'm gonna move on a little lighter, maybe not, is the transit. I just wanted to come and talk about this. I want the traffic fixed and everything as well, but it's all important. Everything from immigration, health care, keeping our hospitals open, safety, as we see we're talking about now. We cut a budget on school systems. I believe in social workers. You know those kids need that right now. Right now they need that. We cannot take from everything else and put it all into concrete. We must cover along the way what we need to survive and sustain each day. We cannot give money out of our pockets. We're barely able to pay for what we have going on now. Cost of living is not keeping up with expenses. And that is serious because at the end of the day, we're doing all that we can. Yes, we want to fund everything, but let's come up with a plan that we can benefit and we make a increase or impact gradually, not all at once. Looking at the years, I have grown kids. I'm not only talking about my pocket, my kids' pockets, my neighbors' pockets. Those of us who are service workers, these police officers, the firemen, us, some of you politicians, our salaries don't even make what that. So we're talking about our own families as well. So I don't want to forget this. I want us to keep the love going, to keep everything going, make one step at a time towards positive. Me coming here tonight was a big step. I did not even want to come out my house. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll go to church. And then God led me, said, in that meeting down the street, and I came here. I'm so glad that I came here. I am so glad. Each step. Now, we definitely want him punished to the fullest extent of the law for the murders that he committed against innocent people. Thank you.
My name is Kimberly Wright, and I live in North Nashville. Mayor Briley, once again, I say hello. At your last town meeting, when asked about commitments to or for solutions to various issues such as lighting, safety along bus routes in District 3, teen violence, more equality and access to education, addressing social disparities and discipline, including helping Dr. Joseph's MNPS budget, homelessness, and affordable housing, your ending reply was, if transit does not pass, I have no tools. What does this mean? That you have no tools if or when the transit fails or is deferred? What will be plan B or alternative tools that can be used to help decrease the percentages of the issues that were mentioned here and in your last town hall meeting?
Well, that's not exactly what I said, but what I said at the last town hall meeting was that if transit doesn't pass, I'll have fewer tools to do things along on all those issues, which is true. Now, on affordable housing, I think I talked about a very specific item that's on the agenda that should come out soon to deal with homelessness, to actually build some housing that is going to be permanent for the people who are homeless. We're committed to doing $10 million in the Barnes Fund to continue our investments in housing for the poor. In terms of, there were a lot of issues there, so I'm going to try to remember exactly what they all were. Obviously, I think everybody knows that we got to do something about traffic and transportation in our community. I believe the best solution for that is to vote for the transit initiative on May 1st. Early voting stops 26th. What's today? The 24th. 2 more days to do that. All the early voting sites are open. When it comes to sidewalks and lighting, I think the particular location that was brought up is in the General Services District. And under our current tax structure, lighting isn't paid for. So that's what I think I commented in terms of that. We continue to make strategic investments in sidewalks because we know that being able to walk from one's home to a school is the highest priority. So as we prioritize that spending, that's what we're trying to do. I think you also mentioned school discipline. There is some good evidence out there that there's a disparity when it comes to school discipline. Primarily African American young men get disciplined at a higher rate with harsher punishments than white children. And Dr. Joseph and the school board have already made some progress there. I'm committed to helping them continue that progress. Judge Calloway at Juvenile Court is leading the effort on that. She's a longtime leader in the community on juvenile justice issues, on restorative justice, and we're working hard to make sure that we can do some things there. I met last week with a group of community grassroots activists working on outreach to juveniles in our town. Because I think everybody appreciates and understands that what we've got to do is stop treating young people in trouble as people that have something wrong with them and start thinking about what has happened to them. It's called ACEs. It's called adverse childhood events, and we've got to, it's clear there's tons of evidence out there that if you go through the adverse childhood events, if you get past a certain number, there's a high risk of mental illness and drug addiction and incarceration. And so we got to start addressing each one of those potential adverse childhood events. I'm committed to doing all of those things. I think the point of her question was that I had insinuated or said that if we don't pass transit, we can't do anything about any of those things. If somebody believes I said that, I'll be glad to talk to them at any time and explain what I was getting at. What I'm getting at is that without a dedicated fund, a dedicated source of revenue for transit, every year we're going to have to take more from the general fund to spend on transit generally. So it just gives us less money generally to spend on all of those issues. I'm totally committed to doing everything we can. Passing the transit initiative just gives us an additional tool to focus on the issues that are important to this community.
Good evening. My name is Marisha Jackson. I'm too close to the thing, aren't I? I live in Donaldson, and I work at Nashville General Hospital. You have voiced your commitment to the hospital. My question for you is, are you committed to the budget that was submitted? Or are we likely to be underfunded again and have to come back and ask for a supplement?
Well, I'm still working on the budget, and the precise numbers are still to be worked out. It's going to be a very tight budget, a status quo budget this year, but I'm committed to making sure that the hospital doesn't have to come back and ask for a supplement. There are things that are in the works. Dr. Webb and I have talked about in terms of better alignment between Meharry and General Hospital to try and reduce the overall expense to the city associated with the hospital while maintaining the current level of service. And I think we can do that. Everybody in town agrees, I'm sure, that if we could provide the same level of service for less money, that's what we ought to do, because it would give us more money to spend on issues like juvenile justice and building sidewalks and the things that are important to us overall. So I'm committed to making sure you don't need to come back for a supplement and that there's sufficient money for the hospital to operate this year. There's already been a 4% request, which is I guess, capital expenditure, and the council has already approved more than $500,000 that was needed on a quick basis to get some supplies and equipment into the hospital. So we've already done that. We're going to make sure that the hospital is funded adequately this year without the need for a supplement.
Good evening. My name is Monica Kemp, and my question is for Chief Anderson. I would like to know what type of training do your officers go through in helping them deal with youth, young people? When you stop them, you know, they kind of combative, they're kind of scared of the police, they don't know if they want to answer the question, run, you're going to put them in jail, beat them, whatever. What type of training do you have? And do you offer classes for the young people to help them know how to deal with police officers?
We have approximately 20 weeks in our training academy for recruit training, and a great portion of that is devoted to social science issues, things you're talking about, dealing with people in general, dealing with youth specifically. So I would invite you to visit our academy, go through the curriculum, and if there's anything that we can improve on, we certainly want to.
I think we've got time for one more question, maybe. Unless it's a long question. We got time for one short question. One short, easy question. We can do two. We can do two.
Okay. All right. It's not that long, but okay. So I'm Anthony Kuhn. I live in Oakwood, so just not too far from here. So my question is more directed again toward Chief Anderson. So I know you've mentioned before that you know, obviously as our city continues to grow, it gets more and more residents. That we don't really have the staffing, the police staffing where we should have for a city of our size, and that so my question is, you know, what can we do to, what's being done to try to address that? I mean, looking back at, you know, we've had, you know, obviously far too many homicides. I mean, last year we had what, over 100? I mean, that's way unacceptable for our great city. I mean, and we have far too many shootings and far too many just other incidences of violent crime. It's been on the rise. You know, some of the numbers have, at least in the past couple of years, and obviously people are concerned about that. And you know, some of the issues might be contributed to, oh, we were understaffed. Well, how is that true? I mean, what is being done to try to address that? Maybe try to bring staffing levels up to where they should be, and to try to tick some of these numbers down. Maybe, you know, bring more community policing so people aren't afraid of police, and, you know, make sure that there's no police profiling, any of that sort of stuff. But basically, I know mine's kind of a multi-part kind of question, but, you know, I do see it on the internet boards, and the numbers are out there. I mean, obviously y'all did a very phenomenal job with the last couple of days with, you know, hunting down and tracking Mr. Ryan King and getting him off the streets. That was wonderful. I mean, obviously, it's very, very much thank you for that. But outside of all that ongoing, how can we tackle these issues and try to get these homicides down and try to do what we can to make the city a safer place?
So when we talk about staffing for police departments, there is no magical number. If you talk to the police chiefs over on the East Coast, their number is about 2 times as high per capita as on the West Coast. So there's not any magic number that we're looking for here. But what I would say is that the more police officers we have, the more effective that we can be. But everything is a balance. You've heard the mayor talking about the budget. So when I present our budget improvements, what I would like to add to the police department, I always make it clear to the mayor, this is a menu. This is a menu. And if we receive these resources, this is what we can do. But the mayor and his staff have a very tough job of taking the city's revenues and dividing them across the department. You've got the water department here, you've got the health department, you've got public works. All those things have to be taken care of. Now, another thing that comes into play when we're dealing with staffing is, where do we get police officers? In the present climate, it's very difficult to recruit people to be police officers. Last year, the council approved 70 new positions. We've only been able to fill about 29 of those so far. We're going to put on another class to attempt the rest of that 70. So I'm not comfortable coming to the mayor and coming to the council saying I need more when I'm not able to fill the positions that I have now. So the large answer to your question is we've all got to work together harder. We've got to make this a community-based law enforcement effort. Right now, we have 586 neighborhood groups across Nashville. If you're not in a neighborhood group, I urge you to get into one. But we've got to work together, and I think over the last 2 or 3 days, we've demonstrated as a community that we can work together. We just got to do that at that level every day.
Okay, last question. There you go.
I think you said 2 more questions, so I'm going to take the last 2.
No, he was number 1. You're number 2.
Okay. 2 quick questions. My name is Carlton Barker. I've been in the neighborhood 24, 25 years as well. Question about the mass transit. This may be a bad word as well. Assuming that it does pass, do we know at this point what kind of changes we can expect to see in our community? And my second question is, I do recall at one point hearing about a new police precinct over on Murfreesboro Road where the old Kmart is. Wondering if that's still in the works, or is that still a plan going forward?
Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer to the second question is yes.
Well, I think, Mayor, the answer is certainly yes.
Yeah.
Certainly, that land has been purchased by the city. It's our intention to open a precinct. The mayor has expressed that same intention, but it's a matter of, one, the budget to allocate that. We need 62 new police officers to open that precinct. And you've heard what I said about the current state of recruitment. So we're going to have to work on that. And then obviously in our capital improvement plan, we've got to actually build the precinct. But that would be 9. That will carve out the precinct so you have your own commander and your own flex teams and your own CSU squad to make it a neighborhood police department. And I promise for everybody else in Nashville, as soon as the 9th precinct, the dust has settled there, we need to start talking about the 10th as Nashville keeps growing. But that's my commitment, and that's the commitment the mayor has expressed to me.
Right. It's going to happen. It's got to get built, so it's going to take a little while, but it will open.
Okay. Last year, I was asked to repeat the numbers on staffing. Last year, the council, we do 2 classes a year to keep up with attrition. We try to hire about 60 to 65 in every class, hoping to graduate 45 to 50. That's just to keep up with attrition, people leaving. And it's a generational thing. Now we have people walking in the door, serving just a few years, and decide they want another career. So, and that's what we've experienced over the past few years. People don't stay 20 and 30 years like they did in the past. So we received funding from the council, from the mayor last year for 70 additional positions to bring our number up to 1,510. So far, we graduated a class a couple of weeks ago with 29. So we're still working to fill those additional positions. And what I said about the new precinct, we need 62 new officers to open that precinct. So just as soon as we get to 70 filled, then we will start working on that. But again, you've heard what the mayor said about status quo budget. The revenues aren't there, so we'll have to balance that. And that's a hard job for the mayor and his staff to do, allocating those funds across the government.
The answer to the first question about when the referendum passes, the first things that you'll see are expansion of the bus service, both in terms of the hours of operation, 20 hours a day for 6 days a week. Sunday is 16 hours a day. Also see increased frequency of routes. So instead of, for example, one every 20 minutes, it might be one every 10 or 15, just more often. On top of that, Access Ride is going to be expanded. So that's for people who, for whatever reason, age or disability, can't get to a bus route or not close enough to a bus route. We send the Access Ride vans out to get people. That service will be improved and hopefully will be quickly up to same-day service on that. Additionally, for people who are at 0 to 100% of AMI will have a free pass that rolls out pretty quickly. I think the numbers are for people from 100 to 200% of AMI that get a discounted pass. I may be a little bit off on those details. Is that basically right, though? Basically? Okay, all right. So if you're interested in that, there's more details. We can get you on that. The bus service part is, maybe we've undersold that a little bit because that is going to happen promptly. It's not going to require a bunch of construction. It's not going to tear up the roads. It's going to happen quickly. And one of the things we haven't talked that much about education, but for the last decade, we have built an education system designed around choice. Families should be able to choose the school that's best for their child. So if your child gets into MEGS, which is a pathway to one of the country's best high schools, and you live in a community where there's no bus service getting you there, it's not really much of a choice, is it? Right? Especially if both parents work a 7 to 3 shift and then a second job later. You got to be able to find a way for that young person to get to and from that school. This expansion of bus service at MTA is going to radically increase the number of students who can get to and from middle school in our town on the existing service. And middle school, high schoolers already get a free pass. Middle schoolers, they get a free MTA pass already. So this is really going to create a whole new series of opportunities for students in our community. So that's what's going to happen promptly when it passes. Let me tell you what's going to happen if it doesn't pass. Right now we have certain parts of town already where we have reached a saturation point for automobiles, right? We drove, anybody who drove from downtown to here went through one on their way here, right? The number of saturation points is going to expand, not just in number, but in location. So even if you're not getting a light rail line coming to your part of town, if you don't vote for transit, what you can clear for this initiative, what you can anticipate over the coming years is that you'll have more and more saturation points. No matter where you live in our county, it will take you longer to get from point A to point B because 1 million people are coming to the region, whether we want them to or not. They're going to add cars to our streets, and the only way to avoid more and more saturation points of automobiles is to build out a mass transit system. Now, there's been a fair amount of hostility, more than I would have liked in my hometown, about this initiative. And on May 2nd, we're all going to come together and start moving forward together to build out a transit system that supports the kind of community we want to be. And I'm committed to doing that and bringing us all back together on May 2nd so we can work towards a positive solution for this community. And I know that Council Lady Karen Johnson came in just at the very last minute, and I'm positive that she was busy doing something. Campaigning, maybe? Perhaps. So, at any rate, I want to thank her for coming as well. And I do want to thank everybody who came tonight. Whether you asked a question or not, it is important for us to be face-to-face and talk to each other about the city we live in. So thank you very much.